Hello everyone. Today we will be discussing the Sabbath and how we can be encouraged that the laws about the Sabbath and the actual days of the Sabbath has never been changed. Now some of this has been addressed in various past videos that I have done, but today I'm putting them together in one place. We will be discussing the first day of creation. We'll be discussing the first Sabbath law, evening and purity, Sabbath and feast days, and we will look into the Dead Sea Scrolls and historical documents, as well as looking into the protection of the Sabbath by Sabbath keepers throughout the centuries. All right, let's begin. The first day. And Yahweh said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And Yahweh saw the light, that it was good. And Yahweh divided the light from the darkness. And Yahweh called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And evening and the morning were the first day. This is Genesis 1:3-5. So we can already see the pattern is established here in Genesis. Sundown to sundown, evening to evening, right? The first day is evening to morning. So we know that the pattern is always going to begin in the evening. Now we can also see that light was brought in to separate the already formed darkness. So the Father created the darkness first, then he brought in the light. And we also see these same repeating patterns of evening to morning on the first day in Genesis 1:8, 1:13, 1:19, 1:23, 1:31, and even in Leviticus 23:27-32. Let's take a look at these. Genesis 1:8 says, "And Elohim called the expanse, or the firmament, heaven, and there was evening, and there was morning the second day. And there was evening, and there was morning the third day. And there was evening, and there was morning the fourth day. And there was evening, and there was morning the fifth day. And Elohim saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning the sixth day." Let's go on to Leviticus. "Now on the 10th day of the 7th month is the day of atonement. It shall be for you a time of holy convocation, and you shall afflict yourselves, and present a food offering to Yahweh, and you shall not do any work on that very day. For it is a day of atonement, to make atonement for you before Yahweh your Elohim. For whoever is not afflicted on that very day shall be cut off from his people. And whoever does any work on that very day, that person I will destroy from among his people. You shall not do any work. It is a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwelling places. It shall be to you a Sabbath of solemn rest, and you shall afflict yourselves. On the 9th day of the month, beginning at evening, from evening to evening, shall you keep your Sabbath." All right, so we see that pattern. Every day begins with the evening. I want to show you this same verse from the Targum Neophiti. And this is the Aramaic. It was found in Palestine. And this is a different version, but it is giving us a different look at how this was presented in the Aramaic. "From the beginning, with wisdom, the memra of Yahweh." So the memra, every time we see the word memra, it's actually meaning the word. When we see a capital W for the word, we know it's actually in reference to our Yahusha, right? So let's take a look at that again. "From the beginning, with wisdom of a memra of Yahweh, created and perfected the heavens and the earth. And the earth was waste and unformed, desolate of man and beast, empty of plant cultivation and of trees. And darkness was spread over the face of the abyss. And a spirit of mercy from before Yahweh was blowing over the surface of the waters. And the memra of Yahweh," so Yahusha, Memra of Yahusha, the Word, said, "Let there be light." And there was light according to the decree of Yahusha. And it was manifest before Yahuwah that the light was good. And Memra of Yahuwah separated the light from the darkness. And Yahusha called the light daytime. In the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, in the order of the work of creation, the first day. So here we also see there is an order of creation. So the order of creation began in the evening. All right, so both versions show the same concept. Darkness is created first. So the verse says, "And darkness was spread over the face of the abyss." And then he created light. And Yahweh said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And then the third step is he calls the first day. He calls it the first day. So evening and morning were the first day. And then the other one, it said, "And there was evening and there was morning in the order of the work of creation, the first day." So darkness created, light was created. He calls this the first day. So notice here, again, the darkness is created first, light is brought in. And keep in mind, the very first day of creation, we didn't even have the sun, the moon, and the stars. So darkness was created without the stars and the moon. Light was created without the sun. So this is before his timekeeping even appears. He's just stating the fact that darkness is going to be called evening. The light part is going to be called daytime, light, right? And this is how the order of the work of creation is. And that is actually sounds so much easier to understand in that Targum there that we had. All right. Now remember, it was good. So in Genesis 1:4, "And Elohim saw the light, that it was good. And Elohim divided the light from the darkness." So here in Genesis, Yahuwah himself, is calling all his creation good, right? There are those out there who are using sunrise to sunrise as their concept of what a day is and when a day begins. And, I've looked into this quite a bit. I've looked into their side of things, and I've looked into the verses that they use. And one of the major verses that they use is Ephesians 5:8. And it says, "But we are children of the light, not of the darkness. What do we have to do with the dark?" This is a verse that is being used to perpetuate this idea that the day begins in the morning. But this verse, Ephesians 5:8, if you take it in context, if you go and take a look at what the chapter is actually talking about, it has nothing to do with the calendar. The Father created the darkness. He actually created it first. He created the darkness and the light, and his creation he saw was good. So he didn't just say that the light part was good. His creation he called good. It is not an evil creation. We are not children of darkness. Of course we're not. But that's talking about something completely different, right? So let's look into this. The word darkness in Ephesians 5:8 actually is Strong's 4655, and it means darkness, but it actually means it more of a moral darkness. It talks about shadiness and obscurity. But when you take a look at the word darkness in Genesis, it's Strong's 2822. It's a completely different word being used, and that is dark or darkness. Okay, so we can't be using a verse out of context to explain your idea of the sunrise to sunrise, meaning that we can't start our day in the evening. I mean, because it's evil. It's not evil, folks. He created it and called it good. Let's take a look here at Isaiah 45, 6 through 7 says, that they may know from the rising of the sun and from the west that there is none beside me. I am Yahweh, and there is no one else. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, Yahweh, do all these things. So he creates light, he creates darkness, he creates peace and evil. So he's the creator of all things, right? So we have to keep those in mind. Now, let's get talking about the first Sabbath law. All right, Exodus 20 verse 8 says, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And there are other versions that say, for example, in the Targum Neophiti, it actually says beware regarding the Sabbath day. Other versions say observe the Sabbath day. So the key word in the 10 Commandments is the word remember. Now, my husband said something great the other day. He said that the Father didn't tell us to remember not to murder. He didn't tell us to remember not to commit adultery. No, there's only one place that he tells us to remember. We need to remember the Sabbath day. That's the harder one, right? So, we doubt his reminders. I mean, I've actually heard people say, well, we don't need to do the Sabbath. So are you doubting why he used the word remember the Sabbath? And then there are also those people out there who say that, we don't really know when the true Sabbath is. Times have been changed. We don't have all of that information. I've, looked at a lot of different calendars out there, and there are calendars who will put the Sabbath day on a Tuesday, for example. It might be Tuesday in one month, and the next month it's Wednesday. And I'm going to get into all of that calendar stuff in probably my next presentation or a couple down the road. But there are people who are observing Sunday as their Sabbath this year because it just so happens to work for their calendar. And they say, oh, well, the Sabbath hasn't always been on Saturday. That's misconstrued information. It's been hidden from us and we have found it, and here's where the Sabbath is. Folks, if the Father tells us to remember the Sabbath day, do you think he's going to hide it from us? I posed the question on my YouTube channel asking if there were people who thought that the Sabbath had changed and that it's been hidden over 2,000 years. And I was astonished how many people believe that, it's been hidden. We're going to take a look at this evidence. I'm going to show you documented proof that the Sabbath being on the seventh day, which is what we know as Saturday, throughout time has never changed. He tells us to remember it. He doesn't tell us to remember it and then hide it from us. He told us to remember it for a whole lot of other reasons, and we're going to look at some of these reasons. Let's take a look. All right. The day begins at evening, and this is where we have to start at step 1. We have to go back to creation and figure out how the Sabbath works. When is it? What are we supposed to do on it? What's important about it? And let's take a look at step 1. We saw when the day began according to Genesis and Leviticus. Now, through this portion, I'm not putting my interpretation on any of this. I am giving you the scripture. So this information so far is founded in scripture. There is an order of operations, and it's right in front of us. And I know many of us, I know many of us came out of Christianity and we don't want anything to do with the Roman and pagan teachings. And, some people say, well, we can't we can't worship on Saturday. That's Saturnalia Day. Or, we can't call it Wednesday because that's a pagan name. Well, that's just what we know it as, and that's how we get along in our everyday life. I understand that. But then we have people who are coming out of the Roman pagan teachings, and they're leaning into the Torah, and they want to make sure that they're doing things that aren't associated with the Roman pagan ways. And then they start going towards these Jewish pagan things and say, oh, we can't even have anything to do with Jewishness, right? Because they've swayed away from the true Torah, right? And so they must be wrong also. When Catholicism or Christianity took over, they wanted nothing to do with the Jews, and they called anybody who followed any of the commandments Judaizers, right? And so they pushed everything aside and said, we don't want anything to do with those Judaizers or those Jews, right? They've done it all wrong this whole time. Well, although I do believe that the Jewish religion has a lot wrong with it, just as the Roman Catholic, just as the Christians, all religions have something wrong, but some of them might have pieces. They might have little nuggets. They might have some breadcrumbs that actually came from the Father. So not everything the Jews believe is wrong, right? It's not everything. Although it's hard to admit, they still hold on to a few of the correct ancient beliefs. When a day begins is one of those things that's founded in Scripture, and I've already shown you some of those, but we can't just push everything aside because it's too Jewish, or we can't push everything aside because, oh, that seems too Roman and or pagan. We have to find out what is from the Father and what is not. I do understand it can be hard to decipher. But let's take a look at some more scriptural references found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And, one of the things that we have to understand before we dig into that is some basics. We have basics. We know that the sun rises in the east and it sets in the west, right? If we know that we can kind of figure out what time of day it is based on where the sun is in the sky, right? The highest point in your southern sky or your northern sky, depending on where you are in the world, the highest point during the day is your noon, solar noon, right? So rises in the east, sets in the west. So we can tell time pretty much based on where the sun is, right? During the day. But just the daytime doesn't help us to determine when we are in the month, when we are in the year, what's going on, until we see his clock coming out at night. His stars shine in its brilliance, right? His clock comes out at night, and we can see so much more. So not only does his daytime give us the hours, we look at the nighttime to give us more information. And it comes with a whole lot more. Let's take a look at 1 Baruch 3:34. The stars shined in their watches and rejoiced. When he calls them, they say, Here we be. And so with cheerfulness they showed light unto him that made them. Oh, they come out and it's beautiful. They come out with cheerfulness. They come out in the right order, in the right way, exactly according to his calendar and his clock. Okay, so the night was created, or the darkness, I should say. The darkness was created first. Light came in, and a few days later, then we get the sun, the moon, and the stars. But that is all part of his clock. And so, but his timing for the day, in parentheses, daytime, or sorry, not daytime, his day comes at night to begin with. Let's take a look at those Dead Sea Scrolls that I promised. All right. This is from the Synchronistic Calendars 4Q320. to show itself from the east and shine forth in the center of the sky at the base of the blank from evening to morning on the 4th day of the week of Gamul in the 1st month of the 1st year. So here we have a description of the 4th day. This definition is from evening to morning, and this is actually a verse talking about the 1st day of the year of Gamul. When Gamul, he starts on a Sabbath, but the 1st day of the year is on the 4th day, which is what we know as Wednesday. So here we see it's the 4th day of the week, Wednesday. It's in the priestly order, which is Gamul's 4th day of the week, and it's Abib 1. Now, Gamul is at the beginning of the year every 7th year. So this is literally describing a year of Gamul, when Gamul begins the year, when he is in service on the 4th day of his service, which is Wednesday, and that's Abib 1. More of that information is in my Zadok calendar videos, but this is the description of evening to morning of the 4th day. So again, it's giving us the parameters of what the day is. So it's from evening to morning, right? That is the 1st day of the 1st month of the 1st year, in order. Then we have the Damascus document 4Q 266 through 272 says about the Sabbath, how to keep it properly. A man may not work on the 6th day from the time that the solar orb is above the horizon by its diameter, because this is what is meant by the passage, observe the Sabbath and keep it holy, Deuteronomy 5:12. So over on the right, I just have a picture of a sun. It's really close to setting. This is what we would probably see on the 6th day, which is a Friday, right? 6th day. The orb is still out there. We can still see it, but it's going down, right? So it tells us when the Sabbath begins. It begins right when the sun is about to sink down into that horizon, but it's on the 6th day. So does Sabbath begin on the 7th day? No, it actually begins the 5th day as the sun is setting, the 6th day as the sun is setting. So we observe it's going down or going away on the 6th day, which is Friday. This is the sun going down, which is signaling the Sabbath starting, and that's what we are reading here in the Damascus document. It is not in the gate for the night yet, but it's right on that, middle ground, right? It's going down in the west. So we know, again, as the picture I showed you before, if the sun is mid-sky, we know that it's nowhere near setting. We know that the day hasn't ended. We need to be looking at the sun and know when it's about to go down, and that is our indication that indeed it's going to be the next day. So we need to wait for the sun to go down. Now, in the Damascus document here, it says, let's see, the 6th day, the solar orb is above the horizon by its diameter. It kind of doesn't say exactly what we want it to say. I know that it's kind of vague. Giza Vermes, so I had the different translation. This translation that I'm showing you here is from the Wise Abegg and Cook's version of the Dead Sea Scrolls, a New Translation. But Giza Vermes also has the same piece here. And his translation says, no man shall work on the 6th day from the moment when the sun's orb is distant by its own fullness from the gate, wherein it sinks. So he's literally describing that it's sinking. It's going down. So it's going down in the west, So it's describing that it's right there between, we can see it and it's about to go down. We're not going to be able to see it very soon, right? It's sinking. All right. So again, Sabbath begins Friday evening as the sun is setting. Priestly service, 4Q326. And again, this is the introduction by Wise, Abegg, and Cook. And they state, Sabbaths were the only holy days on which the Jews of this period might have been in at least partial agreement, since the Sabbath always fell on the seventh day. All other holy days, attached as they were by biblical mandate to dates rather than to days of the week, turned into matters of controversy. So here we're talking about calendar days and Sabbaths, right? Now, Wise, Abegg, and Cook, the authors, state that their evidence of the scrolls through their ancient text, through everything they've seen, indicate that the Jews always kept the Sabbath on Saturday. Aside from keeping the different calendar than the Zadoks, they agreed on this one thing, and that was when the Sabbath was to be observed. So they might not have agreed on when all of the feast days were, but they did agree when the Sabbath began. And here we're going to go back to Yom Kippur, as I read earlier, Leviticus 23:27-32. The Israelites were to observe Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, from evening to evening. And we already read it, but I'm going to reread it. And Yahuwah spoke to Moses, saying, Now on the 10th day of this 7th month is the Day of Atonement. It shall be for you a time of holy convocation. You shall afflict yourselves and present a food offering to Yahuwah, and you shall do no work on it that very day, for that Day of Atonement. For that is the Day of Atonement. So he's talking about a day, right? It's called the day, Yom, the Day of Atonement. To make atonement for you before Yahweh your Elohim. For whoever is not afflicted on that very day shall be cut off from his people. And whoever does work on that very day. So again, he's talking about the day. That word has already come up a couple of times here. That person I will destroy from among his people. You shall not do any work. It is a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwelling places. It shall be to you a Sabbath of solemn rest, and you shall afflict yourselves. On the 9th day of the month, beginning at evening, from evening to evening, you shall keep your Sabbath. Okay, so over and over, it stated that the Day of Atonement, you're going to celebrate the Day of Atonement, and this is how you're going to do it. And the day, right? But then it goes on to say, started at evening. So why, if it's the Day of Atonement, and he's describing it over and over again as a day, why would he be describing it starting in the evening? Right? It's all coming together, right? So it says Yom Kippur is the 10th day of the 7th month. So Leviticus 23:32 says Yom Kippur begins on the evening of the 9th. Is Moses contradicting himself about the timing of Yom Kippur? Why would he be saying that it starts in the evening if a day begins in the morning? Is he contradicting what the Father is saying? Is he contradicting what a day is? I'm pretty sure Moses is not contradicting the Sabbath. He's not doing it incorrectly. It's clear that the 9th day is ending and the 10th day is beginning. This falls under the whole section about Sabbaths. This whole Leviticus 23 is all talking about how to do the Sabbaths, right? So we should assume that they all begin at evening and all end at evening. Now, going back to when a day begins, we saw that, the Father created evening to morning, right? That is the pattern. We saw in the Targum, we saw the pattern was how a day was created, right? How it was ordered. So if a day is ordered to be in this direction and all days are to be in evening, don't you assume that a feast day would also begin in the evening? Absolutely, right? So we're going in the same pattern. All right. Now, I try to come up with an analogy, and I ran it by my husband and I said, this is the only thing I can think of, but it might work. And if it doesn't, I'm sorry. I'm a gardener and I like to water my garden. It's fun to water my garden. Now, my analogy is this. I water my garden in the morning, right? The routine is every single morning my garden gets watered. So I'm going to water on Sunday morning, Monday morning, Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning, Thursday morning, Friday morning. But I know that I can't water on the morning of the Sabbath because that would be work in my opinion. So I'm not going to go out and water my garden. But my whole pattern is that I water my garden every 24 hours. So if I'm skipping Sabbath morning to water my garden and it hasn't been watered all day, maybe it's 100 degrees outside, I still need to go out and water my garden. They didn't get a lot of water today. So when Sabbath ends, I'm now going to go out and water my garden. So now I'm watering here at Saturday evening. Let me see. I have my little pointer here. I am now watering here at Saturday evening. Sabbath is over, right? So now I'm watering. I watered here because I skipped this one. So now when I go out in the morning, on Sunday morning, I don't want to water my garden. It just got watered the night before and it's still wet. If I go out on Sunday morning and water my garden as I have always done, I will be overwatering my garden. So I'm not going to water my garden on Sunday morning. So because I didn't water my garden on Sunday morning and it's lasted all day and it's 100 degrees and I need to get out there and water my drooping garden, I'm going to go out on Sunday evening and water my garden. Now, folks, I've just changed my whole pattern. My pattern was always in the morning. But now it's forced me to go in the evening. And I really hope I make sense here. But what I'm saying is, if you're going in a single pattern and all of a sudden something else comes up in your pattern and it pushes you to a whole other pattern, this is how I see it would be if it was sunrise to sunrise. We are going morning, 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 morning. But oh no, but now we're going to start doing the Yom Kippur in the evening. Okay, so now we have an evening pattern. And then it's going to this pattern is going to be shifting all of the time. And that's how I would see doing a sunrise to sunrise pattern all the way until we get to Yom Kippur and then shifting the pattern. I don't believe the Father has shifted our pattern. I don't think he's all of a sudden going to say, we do the days like this, but now I'm going to catch you off guard and I'm going to make you go to the evening and celebrate this feast day in this special way. I don't believe he's throwing us off on, we'd have to sit there and look and try to figure this out. He stops us in our tracks and says, oh, I'm changing the pattern on you. I don't believe he does that to us. He is consistent in his patterns and he makes them easy to remember, right? He's not going to give us something and just, throw it down and say, here, do this one on the evening. All other days, it's going to be a different pattern, but I'm just going to throw you off here and tell you to do it in the evening. I just don't believe that is how our Father works. All right, we're going to get to Jubilees today, and we're going to talk about Abram's observation and where he tells us the start of a day. Let's take a look at Jubilees chapter 12, verse 16. And it says, and in the 6th week, in its 5th year, Abram sat up through the night on the first day, and I have that highlighted, of the 7th month to observe the stars from the evening to the morning, in order to see what kind of year it would be in respect to the rains. This was also in the Dead Sea Scrolls 11Q12. The Jubilees was. So this is stating the first day. So Abram is literally going out on the first day of the 7th month. So why would he go out on the first day of the 7th month in the evening to start his observation? Yes, he's going out to see the stars, but it didn't say it was the second day, right? It is literally telling us when the first day of the 7th month is. It's at the beginning, right? It's at the beginning of the evening. Let's take a look. Another example is Samson's riddle. Now this one is in Judges chapter 14:12. And if you haven't read that in a while, this is where Samson is having a feast, and he goes and he asks some people if they want to solve a riddle. And this is where we are. And Samson said unto them, I will now put forth a riddle unto you. If you can certainly declare it to me within 7 days of the feast and find it out, then I will give you 30 sheets and 30 changes of garments. But if you cannot declare it to me, then you shall give me 30 sheets and 30 changes of garments. And they said unto him, Put forth the riddle that we might hear it. All right, let's take a look what happens. And if you remember this whole scenario, his wife keeps begging for the answer so that she can tell them, right? And so she ends up doing exactly what she wanted to do. And she wept before him 7 days while their feast lasted. And it came to pass on the 7th day that he told her, because she lay sore upon him. And she told the riddle to the children of her people. So she went and spread the word what the answer was. And the men of the city said unto them on the 7th day, before the sun went down. And here's the riddle. What is sweeter than honey, and what is stronger than a lion? And he said unto them, If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have found out my riddle. So obviously he's saying that if you found out from my wife what the answer was, right? The key part here is that Samson said they had 7 days to solve this riddle. Now the men came before the sun went down. And that's key here. Why was it necessary for them to come before the sun went down? Clearly, they could have told him the answer after the sun went down, even a minute after, right? No, they had to do it then because otherwise they would be starting into the next day, right? They had to tell him before the sun went down because when the sun went down, it was going to be the next day of the week, whatever day of the week it was going to be. So this is another clear indication that the new day was going to begin as soon as the sun went down. I have another example, and this is a very common one that we hear, is Nehemiah, chapter 13:19. As soon as it began to grow dark, the gates of Jerusalem before the Sabbath, I commanded the doors should be shut and gave orders that they should not be opened until after the Sabbath. And I stationed some of my servants at the gates, that no load might be brought in on the Sabbath day. So here we have a couple of things highlighted. It's beginning to grow dark. Now, just a few minutes ago, earlier in this presentation, we saw in the Dead Sea Scrolls that as the solar orb is going down and it's beginning to grow dark, that's when the Sabbath begins. Oops, I accidentally pushed a button. So he had to shut the gates at the time of Sabbath. So he's doing that, and they're not going to open it until after Sabbath ends. So Nehemiah is commanding his people to shut the gates as soon as it begins to grow dark to prevent the Sabbath from being defiled by the merchants, the buyers and the sellers. So why would he command them to be shut at night if Sabbath didn't begin until the morning? So the scenario is this. The sun is going down, the gates are being closed, and it doesn't open again until the Sabbath is over. He's not closing it ahead of time. He's closing it at the Sabbath. It's growing dark, it's evening, the Sabbath has begun. All right, the order and progression of the day according to the Dead Sea Scrolls. So here we're going to look at the progression of a day. How does a day begin, and what's the progression of the day? And this is according to the Dead Sea Scrolls. All right, let's see here. We have the liturgical calendar 4Q334. On the 8th day of the month in the evening, I'm just going to paraphrase here. We're going to sing 8 songs. On the 8th day of the month in the evening, we sing 8 songs. This is talking about the priests singing the songs for each day. And 40 words of praise during the day. Blank songs and 16 words of praise. Okay, so here we have the 8th day of the month in the evening. 8 songs are being sung, 40 words of praise. And then it says during the day, another set of songs are being sung, and then 16 words of praise. And then it goes into the 9th day of the month in the evening, 8 songs and 42 words of praise. During the day, this many songs and 18 words of praise are to be spoken. So this is describing that the next morning, the next daytime, is still the same date as the previous evening. So taking a look here, so we have the 7th day, which is our Sabbath. This is the morning of our Sabbath. And then it says on the 8th day of the month in the evening. So here we have 7 p.m.-ish, sunset, 8th day. We're going to sing 8 songs, right here, 8 songs and 40 words of praise. We're going to sing those right here. And then it says during the day, so we're still on the 8th day of the month. Then it says during the day, so here's all in yellow is all the daytime. All the brown is dark. During the day, we're going to sing 16 words of praise. So here we have at night, we sang the 8 songs. In the morning, we're going to sing 16 words of praise. Then the next section says on the 9th day of the month in the evening, we're going to sing 8 songs. Right here. We're singing 8 songs. And then during the day, we're going to sing 18 words of praise. So here's the daytime. Here's the 18 words of praise on the 9th day of the month. So see that this is the progression. 8 songs, 16 words of praise. 8 songs, 18 words of praise. That's the progression of the day. So if the day started in the morning, in the AM, then all of these texts would have had to have been read in backwards order. We would have had to have read what to do in the morning first, and then go back to the sentence before to read what to do at the evening. Does that make sense? So if this was wrong, or I should say if it was the other way around, we'd have to read during the daytime, sing the 16 words of praise. And then at night, we need to go back a sentence to see what we need to do at night, right? So this is the order of the progression of the day. Evening, morning, evening, morning. The next section I'm going to read is from the daily prayers section. And this is going to show you the same type of progression. This is the daily prayers 4Q503. On the 15th day of the month in the evening, they shall offer praise. And they shall say, Blessed is Elohim of Israel, who conceals before him in every division of his glory, this evening, eternally to praise him. So this is the 15th of the month in the evening. Our redemption is at the beginning of blank, the cycles of the light-giving orbs. What are the light-giving orbs that come out at night? Those are the stars and the moon, right? Today, the 14th day of the month, we have celebrated the rule of the light of the day. Peace be unto you, O Israel. Okay, so the timekeeping here begins in the evening, and it said it's the 15th day of the month. And then it moves on to verse 10 here. It says today's the 14th, or verse 9. Today's the 14th day of the month. We have celebrated. So this states that they already celebrated. ED at the end means they've completed it. So what happened, what they're doing is they're singing this at the 15th day of the month in the evening. But they're telling you what they did during the day before it became evening. During the day before it became evening, it was the 14th day. So here we have the daytime that they've already celebrated the rule of the light. Now it's the evening and it's the 15th. That makes sense? So it is the 15th of the month. Today, earlier, is what they're saying. Earlier today, we celebrated the rule of the light when the sun was out. Okay, now I'm going to move on, and it goes on to say, when the sun rises, when the sun rises to shed light upon the earth, they shall give praise. They shall respond blank, the number blank, 11 days for joyous pilgrimages and glorious festivals. For Chatalee in 15 gates of light, glorious festival by the portions of the evening. Okay. So, they're telling you it's the 15th day of the month. The 14th day was what we just did. Now it's the 15th. Now, verse 12, the sun is rising, right? And we're still talking about the 15 gates, which are saying it's the 15th day. So, I hope you can see this progression. So each day, throughout all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, is just like Genesis. Each day begins with with an offer of praise in the evening, and the next morning it's still the same date the next morning. Okay? So, the 15th, when it's morning, it's still the same date as it was here. Okay. Okay, so let's read here. Now, perhaps this is going to show you a progression of the day in a different way. This is just what I read. I just read the daily prayers. I just took a screenshot because I want you to see how it flows. This is flowing from the same fragment, and then it goes into the different fragment, but I'll get to that in a second. This is the progression of the day. They found this part of the 15th day in one fragment. It's not like they've mixed up the fragments. These fragments are together. This portion of the fragment is together, and it's describing the progression of the day. So, if, again, let's take a look here. This is what we just read. What I just read. This is on the 15th day of the month at evening, they shall offer praise, right? I just read that. And then, here's the morning when the sun rises. So it's still the 15th day of the month after the sun rises. Okay, so this is still the same fragment. It's not put in incorrectly. This is still the progression of the day here. Okay. Now we move on to a different column, and yes, a different fragment, but it's beginning on the 16th day. On the 16th of the month, in the evening, they shall offer praise. They shall say, Blessed is the Elohim of Israel, who has sanctified for himself blank, and now this evening, blank, with precious to us. Peace, blank, Elohim, to bless Jeshurun. When the sun rises to shed light upon the earth, they shall give praise. They shall respond, Blessed is the Elohim of Israel, who blank light. They shall rejoice in blank. We praise your name, O Elohim of the heavenly lights. For you have renewed blank 16 gates of light. So there again, this is the 16th day. That was the 15th day. It talked about 15 portions, 15th gate, right? That's the 15th day. Now we're talking about the 16th day. So we talked about it at the beginning, which was the evening. And then the sun rose. But we're still in the same section talking about the same day. Right? So we have the 16th day. This is in the morning. Again, progression. Here's the 17th at evening. So this is, the fragment is still in working order. They haven't mismatched the fragments. This is still the same fragment. On the 17th day of the month in the evening, they shall offer praise. They shall say, Blessed be Elohim of Israel. Then when the sun rises to shed light upon the earth, they shall give praise. Okay, so there are certain things that these priests are doing in the evening and then they're doing in the morning. But these are the same days when the sun rises. It's the same day that it was the evening before. So again, if the day begins with the morning, wouldn't you think they would have had to reverse this order? Would you really go and start reading this one and then go back to this one to get to, if you're checking off your list to make sure that you're doing this correctly? If I believed that it was sunrise to sunrise, I would have to read this verse first. When the sun rises to shed light upon the earth, they shall give praise. And then I have to go back to verse 12 to read on the 17th what to do at evening. Right? Does that make sense? This is a progression of the day in the correct order. I'm not making this up. I'm not making this up. All right. So here we have the daily prayers, column 8. It says on the 16th day of the month, in the evening they shall offer praise. Again, the 16th day of the month, they're going to offer praise right here, where the number 1 is. Next, when the sun rises to shed light upon the earth, they shall give praise. So second, they're going to offer praise here, but again, it's still the 16th day. And then they go to the next part. On the 17th day of the month, that's number 3, in the evening, they're going to offer praise. And then when the sun rises, they're going to shed light upon the earth. Again, this is the progression. So I don't mean to just sit here and hammer this into you. I'm just showing you verse by verse the progression of the day. We don't have to go and read this text backwards, or we would have to if we believe that it began with the daytime, right? So it matches Genesis chapter 1 exactly. I would have to pause if it were the opposite, and I'd have to sit there and figure it out, cut it out, and put them in the right order, right? If it were backwards. All right. So I hope this explains the progression. I hope that I've shown you in various forms, various formats. I know we all learn differently, but I just wanted to give you a visual. Now we're going to move on to evening and purity and what that has to do with everything. Again, why would the Father want to make a holy day into an abominable day? Every day, obviously, we know through Scripture, has enough trouble of its own. So if we come in contact with uncleanness, we need to know the laws on how to clean ourselves, correct? How to become pure. And here's why it's important to know when a day starts and when it ends. We need to know when we are cleansed based on the laws of purity. And the timing of an evening or the timing of the day is important to know for purity matters. All right, so we have unclean till evening. In Leviticus 11:24 we read, "And by these you shall become unclean. Whoever touches their carcass shall be unclean until evening. And whoever carries any part of their carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening." Leviticus 11, 14, 15, 17, and 22 all state that a person is unclean. Who is unclean until evening. You'll see the same thing in the book of Numbers. So, we also see in the Dead Sea Scrolls in the Damascus document 4Q271 that a man is Sorry, I touch buttons sometimes. A man is pure from all uncleanness who sees the sun set. So question here. If one shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening, why is he not clean after just washing himself? I mean, we go wash our hands are clean. Why do we have to wait till the sun sets? Right? Let's take a look. The Dead Sea Scrolls Damascus document says, no one can bring any skin or garment or any part of any tool with which work is done that is unclean by reason of a corpse, unless it has been sprinkled according to the regulation blank impurity in the era of wickedness. A man is pure from all uncleanness who sees the sun set. So again, why can't we just sprinkle that goodness all over? Why can't we just sprinkle ourselves clean or wash ourselves clean? Why do we have to wait till the sun sets? Right? And so I just have a cute little picture over here of a beautiful sunset, and the sun is gone, right? And we can't really see it. The sun is actually set. So this is what determines when a man is now clean. It is not sprinkling. It is not washing oneself, even though that's required as part of becoming clean. You have to wait until the sun is set, not setting, right? But there's a difference here with purity, I believe. All right, the Sectarian Manifesto states, indeed, while they are yet leprous, they may not eat from the holy food until the sun set on the 8th day. So this means that the Sabbath day has ended, and it is the moment the sun has set and gone away, and now it is Sunday. It has begun. That's what the 8th day is. So we have the 6th day in the evening, which is when Sabbath begins, in the morning. And then, I think I put this wrong. Anyway, that it's still Friday. Oh, I did put it right. It's still Friday, but it's the 7th right there. And then the Saturday Sabbath, and then we have the 8th day. So Sunday is begun after the sun has completely set. You are pure after the sun has set, because it's the next day, the 8th day in the 7-day pattern. All right, then we have the Sectarian Manifesto here states, concerning the purity of the heifer of the sin offering, the one who slaughters it, the one who burns it, the one who gathers its ashes, and the one who sprinkles the water of purification, for all of these, the sun must set for them to be pure, so that the pure might sprinkle the water of purification on the unclean. So again, to be pure, if you are an unclean person in the ways of a corpse, or by leprosy, or just being unclean, any of those unclean things, you have to wait. Yes, you wash, you clean yourself, change your clothes, but you are not officially clean until the sun has set. So keep that in mind. All right, we're going to move along to historically speaking. Did you know that all groups on earth submit that Saturday is the 7th day? This includes people groups in China, for example. And, a lot of people are trying to tell us that the Saturday Sabbath is not always the case, that it changes depending on if you're a lunar Sabbatarian or if you follow equinox start. And again, I'll get into that on another video, but the Sabbath has always been the day we know is Saturday, has always been the 7th day, and it hasn't changed. And there are other people groups across the earth that say the same thing. Side note here, this picture over here on the side, my daughter took. I have a couple of photos that I wanted to put her beautiful handiwork in here, so I just wanted to say how great of a photographer she is. My son is also a photographer. All right, moving right along. Let's see. I do not know why my screen is not changing. Give me a moment here. Alrighty. My screen froze on me, and it has frozen once again. There we go. Okay. Sabbaths around the earth. So we have different languages here that also indicate the seventh day of the week as Saturday. So we know the Romans gave it a name. I know. But the term for the seventh day of the week, or the day of rest, the Sabbath rest, is used all across. So we have Spanish, we have sábado, sábado for Portuguese, subata, asabat in Arabic, all of these different ones. This is all in regards to the seventh day of the week. We call it Saturday, or Sabbath, or Shabbat, right? This is the same day in reference. They are not calling Tuesday a sábado. They're not calling Wednesday a Sabbath. This is always in reference to the seventh day of the week. Keep that in mind. And bear with me. I am having computer problems. I do not know why. So, okay, there we go. We've got historical documents here that I'm going to bring up. The first Christian church, according to Hugh Smith in the History of Christian Church, the first Christian church established at Jerusalem by apostolic authority became its doctrine in practice a model for the greater part of those founded in the first century. These Judaizing Christians were the first known by the outside world as Nazarenes. All Christians agreed in celebrating the seventh day of the week in conformity to the Jewish converts. In China, 781. This comes from Christianity in China. In AD 781, the famous China monument was inscribed in marble to tell of the growth of Christianity in China at the time. The inscription, consisting of 763 words, was unearthed in 1625 near the city of Shangan, and now stands in the forest of tablets, Shangan. The following extract from the stone shows that the Sabbath was observed. It states, in quotes here, "On the seventh day we offer the sacrifices after having purified our hearts and received absolution for our sins. This religion, so perfect and so excellent, is difficult to name, but it enlightens darkness by its brilliant precepts." This next quote is from Antiquities of the Christian Church. The quote states, "We also find in ancient writers frequent mention made of religious assemblies on the Saturday, or the seventh day of the week, which was the Jewish Sabbath. It is not easy to tell the origin of this practice, nor for reasons for it. I consider it here only as a day of public divine service. Athanasius, who is one of the first that mentions it, says, they met on the Sabbath. Not that they were infected with Judaism, but to worship Jesus, the Lord of the Sabbath. And Cassian takes notice of the Egyptian churches, that among them the service of the Lord's Day and the Sabbath was always the same." Key phrase there. In another place he observes that in the monasteries of Egypt and Thebes, they had no public assemblies on other days, besides morning and evening, except on Saturdays and the Lord's Day, when they met at 3 o'clock, that is 9 in the morning, to celebrate communion. All right. Key parts of this one is that it was always the seventh day, the Sabbath day, right? That everybody knew when the Sabbath day was. Now, a lot of people will come and say that when the calendar was changed from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar, we lost the days of the week. We lost the Sabbath during that time. Well, I don't believe so, folks, and here is the example. The days of the week have never changed. The order has always remained, okay? So, this is the chart of how they went from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar. They did not change the days of the week. Those remained the same. They just added the days right here. They didn't move the Sabbath anywhere. They just added the days to the month. All right? So don't you think at this point that the Father would hide it? Do you think that he would hide his Sabbaths from people? Do you think that he would let the Romans take away his Sabbath days? I think he wanted to preserve his Sabbath days, and he has always made a way for us to do that. So the calendar changing from the Julian to the Gregorian did not affect in any way or form the seventh day of the week. And I seriously believe that it was the Father's doing to have him do this way. Yes, they changed it, and he didn't want that, but he preserved it for us. Okay. Let's take a look at people in the know. Here's a quote. It says, "The human race never lost the septenary or the 7-day sequence of weekdays, and that the Sabbath of these later times comes down to us from Adam through the ages without a single lapse." This is Dr. Totten, professor of astronomy at Yale University. Another quote, "7 has been an ancient and honored number among the nations of the earth. They have measured their time by weeks from the beginning. The origin of this was the Sabbath of Elohim," or God, it says, "as Moses has given the reasons for it in his writing." Dr. Layman Coleman. Third quote, "It can be said with assurance that not a day has been lost since creation, and all the calendar changes, notwithstanding, there has been no break in the weekly cycle." Dr. Frank Jeffries, Fellow of Royal Astronomical Society and Research Director of Royal Observatory, Greenwich, England. So, Elohim made the Sabbath after 6 literal days of creation, right? And since then, it is still on the 7th day of the week, known as Saturday. Whatever you want to call it. If you don't want to call it by its Roman pagan name, you go for it. The 7th day, the Sabbath, has always remained the same. There's no need to worry that we are worshiping somehow on the wrong day. I believe Elohim protected his weekly cycle through all of this chaos. We know by scripture that the Antichrist system would change the days and the times. We know that. We were told that it was going to happen. But yet he tells us to remember the Sabbath. He's not hiding it from us. He's not. The true abomination of the Sabbath. Let's take a look what happened. Council of Laodicea. Here is a quote from the council. "Christians shall not Judaize and be idle on Saturday Sabbath, but shall work on that day. But the Lord's day they shall especially honor, as being Christians shall, if possible, do no work on that day. If, however, they are found Judaizing, they shall be shut out from Christ." This is the true abomination. When they forced those keeping the Saturday Sabbath to now follow it on the Sunday, and telling you that you should not rest on the Saturday Sabbath, but if you want to on the Sunday, that's okay. Don't be Judaizing with those Judaizers, those Jewish people. This is when Rome ripped the Sabbath away and told people how to do it on their terms. This is when it was ripped away. However, we know that there were those who stood in the gap through time. Here are groups who fought to keep the 7th-day Sabbath. These are the ones who went against the Roman decree. We have the Nazarenes. We find that term in scriptures in the New Testament, in the 1st century. We have the Quartodecimans. If you haven't researched this group, I urge you to. We have the Sabbateans or the Sabbates in the 4th century. We have the Celtic Church under the leadership of Patrick and Columba. This is what we know as St. Patrick today. He was not a Catholic saint. He was not a Catholic priest. Him and Columba actually fought against it to keep the Sabbath and to keep the laws. We also have the Waldenses of northern Italy and the Vaudois of France in the 12th century. And we have the Passaginis in northern Italy in the 12th and 13th century. And some of these, I'm sure you've seen me post on these people groups, and I'll go through a couple of them. But most of these groups lost their livelihoods or their lives to defend the seventh-day Sabbath. They didn't defend the Tuesday. They didn't defend a Wednesday. It was the seventh day. Now, not every group on this list kept all the commandments, but my point is that they kept the seventh day of what we know as Saturday and lost their lives to it. There is a link here, and let me see if I can put it up. It came up. There's a link here, and yes, it is by Seventh-day Adventist group, Sabbath keeper group. I'm not saying they all keep the same laws, but I really appreciate this list and this that they put together. And I did this with my daughter. We do homeschool, and this was what she learned this year in terms of history of the Nazarenes, the Quartodecimans. We learned about all of these groups of people through the different centuries. So you can actually click on the different centuries if you want. And it is hundreds and hundreds of quotes from books and papyrus and different historical documents throughout the years telling us about these people groups who stood in the gap to keep the seventh day as the Sabbath. And again, there's even discussion in here of people who lost their lives keeping the seventh day. Again, they didn't lose their lives to keep a Tuesday. It was preserved. It was a Saturday. So here is the link if you would like to check it out. So the Passaginis, just a quick little summary. This is a quote about the Passagini groups, and it says, the papal author Bonacursus wrote the following against the Passaginis. Now the Passaginis, folks, they say they don't really understand where the word Passaginis came from, but they were the people who followed the passageway. The way, folks. This picture over on the side, they followed the way. Again, my beautiful daughter's work. They followed the way, so they called themselves the Passaginis. So, not a few, but many know what are the errors of those who are called Passagini. First, they teach that we should obey the Sabbath. Furthermore, to increase their error, they condemn and reject all the church fathers and the whole Roman Church. Yay for them. Yay for them. Here is a little bit about the Celtics. And I'm not talking about the Celtic pagans. I'm talking about those who observe the Torah and the laws and the Sabbaths. So here is a statement. Professor James Moffat, professor of church history at Princeton, says, it seems to have been customary in the Celtic churches of early times, so the early churches in Ireland as well as Scotland, to keep the Saturday, the Jewish Sabbath, as a day of rest from labor. They obeyed the fourth commandment literally upon the seventh day of the week. So this was where St. Patrick is what we know him as, but I call him Patrick, and Columba. Go research these guys. These were not Catholics. They were not priests. These were men who came and taught against all of these laws. These were Sabbath keepers in Scotland and Ireland. And then we have a quote here from Tertullian. It is you, the pagans, at all the events. You have even admitted the sun into the calendar of the week. So there he's talking about Sunday, right? and you have selected its day in preference to the preceding day. For the Jewish feasts are the Sabbath and the purification, all which institutions and practices are of course foreign from your pagan gods. So Tertullian is calling them out. He's accusing those people of sun worship. He's labeling the day of the sun, right, into their calendar. He said, you guys have put this on your calendar instead of the previous day, which is the Sabbath day, which is what the original Sabbath day is. He didn't say Tuesday, right? He didn't say Tuesday, right? And he also states that Sunday worship is a tradition with no scriptural authority. So we know the Romans, in fact, hated the Jews. They hated the seventh-day Sabbath. They hated the laws. They hated everything. And they called you a Judaizer if you followed these. They ordained Saturday to be a fast day. They hated the Father's Day so much so that they came out against it wholeheartedly. Let's talk about the hatred of Yahweh. In John 7:7, it says, the world cannot hate you because it hated me. My apologies. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify about it, that its works are evil. John 3:20, for everyone who does wicked things hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his works should be exposed. So we are exposing what the Romans have done to our Sabbath day, and they're taking it away from everybody and saying, if you follow them, you're in the wrong. And they even put people to death because of it. This is an excerpt from The History of the Sabbath and the First Day of the Week by John Nevins Andrews in 1859. We have found that Sunday from remote antiquity was a heathen festival in honor of the sun, and in the first centuries of the Christian era, this ancient festival was in general veneration in the heathen world. We have learned that patriotism and expediency and the tender regard for the conversion of the Gentile world caused the leaders of the church to adopt as their religious festival the day observed by the heathen, and to retain the same name which the heathen had given it. We have seen that the earliest instance upon record of the actual observance of Sunday in the Christian church is found in the Church of Rome about 140 AD. The great effort on its behalf, AD 196, is by a singular coincidence the first act of papal usurpation. One fact of deep interest will conclude this chapter. The first great effort made to put down the Sabbath was the act of the Church of Rome in turning it into a fast, while Sunday was made a joyful festival. While the Eastern churches retained the Sabbath, a portion of the Western churches, with the Church of Rome at their head, turned it into a fast. Okay, so we're seeing here that the Roman Catholic Church made our Saturday Sabbath into a fast day. Let's read on a little bit here. As a part of the Western churches refused to comply with this ordinance, a long struggle ensued, the result of which is thus stated by Helen. Another quote here. In this difference is stood a long time together, till the end the Roman Church obtained the cause, and Saturday became a fast almost through all the parts of the Western world. I say Western world, and of that alone the Eastern churches begin so far from altering their ancient custom that in the Sixth Council of Constantinople, AD 692, they did admonish those of Rome to forbear fasting on the day upon pain of censure. William James, in a sermon before the University of Oxford, thus states the time when this fast originated. The Western Church began to fast on Saturday at the beginning of the 3rd century, 582. Thus it was seen that this struggle began with the 3rd century, that is, immediately after the year 200. So he goes on to say that they're making Saturday, the Sabbath, a fast day to anger people, to make them hate it, to cause pain on the Saturday Sabbath, and saying that now we're going to do Sunday and it's going to be a joyous day. What they're doing is they're taking away all the joy from what was originally intended to be on our Sabbath day. Okay. This next section, this is the last part. The Roman Church regarded Saturday as a fast in direct opposition to those who regarded it as a Sabbath. Sunday remained a joyful festival in which all fasting and worldly business was avoided as much as possible. But the original commandment of the Decalogue respecting the Sabbath was not then applied to that day. Lord King attests this fact in the following words. Some of the Western churches, that they might not seem to Judaize, fasted on Saturday, as Victorinus Pedovianisis writes, "We used to fast on the seventh day, and it is our custom then to fast, that we may not seem with the Jews to observe the Sabbath. Thus the Sabbath of the Lord was turned into a fast in order to render it despicable before men." Such was the first great effort of the Roman Church toward the suppression of the ancient Sabbath of the Bible. So we see what Rome did. They changed the name. They proceeded to make those who observe the seventh day suffer by requiring them to fast, right? Then they make Sunday this joyous occasion, and they want it to surpass the origination of what our Sabbath was intended to be. Rome hated Sabbath keepers. They venerated the sun, and they all wanted everybody to join in. And if the Sabbath were kept any other day, don't you think that Rome would have done that to a Tuesday? They would have done it to any day because they were willing to do it to the original Sabbath day. Here's a quote from Spain, 305. Canon 26 of the Council of Elvira reveals that the Church of Spain at that time kept Saturday, the seventh day. As to fasting every Sabbath, resolved that the error be corrected of fasting every Sabbath. This resolution of the council is in direct opposition to the policy the Church at Rome had inaugurated, that of commanding Sabbath as a fast day in order to humiliate it and make it repugnant to the people. So here we have Spain saying, we are not doing that. We are not doing that. And then we have the Scottish Church in the 6th century said, in this latter instance, they seem to have followed a custom of which we find traces in the early monastic church of Ireland, by which they held Saturday to be the Sabbath, on which they rested from all their labors. So again, Saturday. These are the people groups who kept the Saturday Sabbath, were the ones who were going against the Roman Catholic Church. It wasn't a Tuesday. These are people who often lost their lives or were jailed, imprisoned, ostracized. People in Scotland and Ireland were pushed out from their original homeland. They had to leave and go to places like Scotland and Ireland to get away from what was happening with the Roman Church. They had to flee. The other one who kept the true Sabbath was Yahusha. He was Sabbath keeping, right? And we need to look at his example because he led by example. Yahusha kept the seventh-day Sabbath with the Jews. 1 Peter 2:22. He committed no sin, neither was deceit found on his mouth. 2 Corinthians 5:21. For our sake he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become righteousness of Elohim. First, we must establish, folks, that Yahusha did not sin while he was on earth, right? He didn't sin. He didn't keep a Sabbath contradictory to his Father's Sabbath. He kept the same Sabbath as the Jews. We see the Pharisees and the Sadducees come out against Yahusha so many times in Scripture. We have in Matthew chapter 9, Yahusha and the disciples are eating with publicans and sinners, and They are told off by the Pharisees, right? In Luke, we see Yahusha and the disciples not washing before eating. Uh-oh, they're doing something, right? Matthew 9:14, the disciples are not fasting. So the Pharisees are coming out against them for that. Matthew 12. Uh-oh, on the Sabbath, Yahusha and his disciples are out plucking corn on the Sabbath, and the Pharisees come out against them. Matthew 12:24. Uh-oh, Yahusha is casting out demons on the Sabbath. And in Luke, we see him healing on the Sabbath. Do we see the Pharisees coming out against Yahusha? Absolutely. They're coming out against him. Everything he's doing on the Sabbath, everything he does wrong. This is just some of the things that they come out against him on, right? Only some. This is just a few. But I really put those on the Sabbath, right? They're talking about things that he did on the Sabbath that the Pharisees and Sadducees didn't like. But not once did they come out and accuse Yahusha and his disciples of keeping a different Sabbath. Not once. Yahusha was keeping the same Sabbath as his Jews. From Friday evening to Saturday evening. Same Sabbath. They didn't come out anywhere and say, hey, you're keeping the wrong Sabbath. What are you talking about? What are you doing? No, folks. Yahusha didn't sin. He kept his Father's Sabbaths on the correct day, and it was the same day. Paul and the disciples kept the Sabbath. But when they departed from Perga, they came to Antioch and Pisidia and went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and sat down. That's in Acts. And when the Jews were gone out of the synagogue, the Gentiles besought that these words might be preached to them the next Sabbath. And the next Sabbath day came almost the whole city together to hear the word of Elohim. These are all Acts, and there's other verses here, 15:21, 16:13, 17:2, and 18:4. Again, here we're seeing that they're keeping the same Sabbath as the rest of the Jews and all the followers. They visited towns, and they were keeping the same Sabbath. The synagogues were open that day. They were doing the teaching. Paul was keeping the same Sabbath. Luke was with Paul during this time. Don't you think Luke would have called him out? Saying, hey, Paul, you're keeping the wrong Sabbath. If they were keeping different Sabbaths or laws, there would have been more issues. We would have seen that. They came out against them for everything else, but we didn't see that. So my takeaway here is to remember the Sabbath day. He did not hide it from us. Let's read Isaiah 58:13 through 14. If you do turn back your foot from the Sabbath, from doing my pleasure on my Kodesh day, and shall call the Sabbath a delight, the Kodesh of Yahweh esteemed, and shall esteem it, not doing your own ways, nor finding your own pleasure, nor speaking your own words, then you shall delight yourself in Yahweh, and I shall cause you to ride on the heights of the earth, and feed you the inheritance of Jacob your father. For the mouth of Yahweh has spoken. Let's not doubt the Father's ability to help us remember the Sabbath. Let's not doubt that he has preserved it for the remnant who chooses to follow the way. He has not hidden it from us for 2,000 years. He has not told us to remember it, because how can we remember something that he has hidden? That doesn't make sense. So if you're keeping a different day of the week as your Sabbath, I would encourage you to look at these verses that I've addressed in this video and look at my other videos on the Zadok calendar. Now, my apologies, I did this again. Those who are keeping a different calendar, I'm not coming out against you. I just encourage you to go and seek what the words are telling you. There's also people who are keeping a different so-called Zadok calendar. They're keeping different Sabbaths because they're starting their year out differently. So this should point out the fact that it's always been a Saturday Sabbath. It's never changed the day of the week. So maybe there's something in error on how you start your year. The Dead Sea Scrolls establishes the seventh-day Sabbath as Saturday. Whether you like to call it the Roman pagan name or not, that's the name that we're given and we know as it is today, right? The Zadokites kept the original calendar, and the Dead Sea Scrolls confirms what day of the week it is. And as addressed here, although pagan names have been given, the days of the week have never changed throughout history. And I will again be presenting on other calendars shortly as to why the scrolls prove that the Wednesday starts the year out every year. And I will also be addressing the lunar calendar, the lunar Sabbatarians, and the equinox start for the year, that they do not match the original calendar nor the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I hope this has helped you. Please, I encourage you to go and take a look at what I have given you. I will never say I'm right and you are wrong. I will say iron sharpens iron, and let's look at this together. Let's seek him first, the kingdom, right? Well, I hope that this has in fact helped you out, and I encourage you to continue listening to my future recordings. I will be posting soon on more of the Dead Sea Scrolls as well. Have a blessed day, and join me next time in the fight for truth. Praise Yah.